Elvis was known as probably the most generous superstar that ever lived. And what makes this special is the fact that he never wanted any publicity for all the times he was generous to friends, family, employees, charitable organizations, and most importantly, to his fans. The following are an assortment of stories told by people who knew Elvis and by others who happened to cross paths with him. Whether you are an Elvis fan or not, there's no doubt these stories will surely touch your heart.
I'd like to tell y'all now a very moving story, one that still touches me today, almost like the one with my uncle and with Elvis, the first time I saw him like that. There was an appeal story written in the commercial appeal there, morning paper in Memphis. And it was an article regarding this little woman that had no legs from the hips down. She was born that way. She had had children, raised them. She would even raise, they had in the story, she had raised some of her grandchildren. And this appeal story was that how she got around on some wood that was nailed together, and underneath they had these roller skates nailed to it. And they had these special handles with some like a leather thing. And she'd pull herself along like skiers do on snow skis and everything. And so Marty read it, Marty Lacker. And he brought it up to the house, and I was sitting there with Elvis at the dining room table. And Marty said, "Elvis, when you get a chance, I think you might want to read this." And I said, "Okay." He finished eating, and he picked over the paper and he looked at it. He looked up after he read it, he said, "Find out where she lives." So Marty did call the paper. Elvis went and bought the most expensive electric wheelchair made. And he and Priscilla, Marty, Alan, Richard, and I think Billy and myself went out there. And it was in the trunk of the car. We took it up to the house. Her husband, who was retired from the railroad, let us in. And he called her out. She came out, we heard her come around that corner. The house was spotless, boards bleached white, the linoleum in the kitchen just shiny, and comes out and we heard her. She comes around that corner face to face with that wheelchair. Oh my, oh my. And tears started to come into her eyes. She knew what it was. And tears came to our eyes. She asked if she could sit in it. We lifted her up, Elvis on the one side and I on the other, put her there, and she's checking it out. And Elvis said, "Ma'am, now, I don't know how to tell you how to operate this thing," but he said, they demonstrated over there, and this here you can just go wherever you want to and get there fast and everything. So he said, "We just wanted you to have it." She starts crying, we start crying, and soon we're out of there. We have to get out of there. We walked outside and Alan said, "Elvis, I don't think she knew who you were." He said, "It doesn't matter. She knows someone cares."
Denise Sanchez, an 8-year-old girl from Santa Fe, New Mexico, had been a huge Elvis Presley fan since she was 4. In December 1971, Denise was diagnosed with an aggressive terminal cancer. Several months later, Denise's mother heard that Elvis would be performing in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on April 19, 1972. Mrs. Sanchez was able to get tickets to the show, and her daughter was thrilled. 2 days before the concert, Mrs. Sanchez spoke with a reporter named Grace Marie Prather, who helped Denise and her mother set up a meeting with Colonel Parker.
Colonel Tom Parker.
Who's calling, please? Hello?
They spoke to Parker at length about Denise's condition and her wish to see Elvis. During the meeting, the Colonel informed Denise that she would be able to meet Elvis after the concert. During the show, Denise and her family were seated in special box seats. Denise was anxious for the performance to end so that she could meet her idol. At intermission, the Sanchez party was invited backstage to Elvis's dressing room. Denise was consumed by nerves as she walked towards his dressing room. You see, cancer had left her nearly bald and had robbed her of a leg. But when Elvis saw the young cancer patient, he knelt in front of her and kissed both her cheeks and told her that she was beautiful. Elvis signed a poster Denise had brought with her. It read, "To Denise, love you, Elvis Presley."
Could you sing me a special song, please?
I sure will.
Don't Cry Daddy or Love Me Tender or whichever one you want.
Alrighty.
Or whichever one you want. Danny, look over here.
In addition, he dedicated his first song after the intermission to Denise, who was thrilled and cried through the entire performance.
Special. What's your favorite song?
There you go. Goodbye.
When Denise got back home, she told her mother that under no circumstances was she going to clean her face and wash off Elvis's kisses. Needless to say, after 4 days, her mother finally forced her to wash, although the memory of that day probably remained with Denise and her family forever after.
So in early March 1974, at Elvis's concert in Monroe, Louisiana, a young fan received an amazing gift from Elvis himself. 5-year-old Rhonda Bowler was attending the show with her mom and her aunt at the Civic Center in their hometown. Here's how her mom, Glenda, described what happened. "We were sitting in the second row at the concert. Rhonda stood up in the aisle. For some reason, Elvis saw her and motioned for his guards to bring her to the stage. His top security man held her at the foot of the stage for the entire concert. Then, during his last song, he had them take her on stage, and he kneeled and held her and sang the last few bars of the song to her. Then he kissed her and put his scarf around her neck. No doubt she reminded him of his own 6-year-old Lisa Marie. But after that, all hell broke loose as a passionate woman tried to take the scarf from 5-year-old Rhonda's neck. The mom described it like a tug of war between a fan and the guard, all while the scarf was around the child's neck. Elvis noticed what was happening in the crowd and wasn't having any of it. Glenda goes on, "Elvis turned around to see what was going on, and I will never forget the look on his face. It was a look of utter torture, hurt, and disgust, a look of pain." What happened next stunned the crowd and no doubt made up for the scarf that Rhonda had just lost. She says, "Elvis had his guards put him down. He came back and picked Rhonda up, jerked his cross from off of his neck, kissed Rhonda and gave it to her and said, 'Here, darling, this is yours and nobody can ever take it away.'" Elvis had just given a 14-karat gold necklace with dark green tourmaline stones to 5-year-old Rhonda.
This is the house that Elvis bought for me. He bought it in 1974. And he came and picked the house out for me. And I liked it, and he liked it. So he said, "Well, Mary, this is your house, if you like it." I told him I loved it. It was really nice.
What is the most awed that you've been by a celebrity being awed by you, where you're standing there, as you said, from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and you're saying, "I can't believe this person is fawning all over me like this"?
Well, I wouldn't say falling all over me or whatever it is, but Elvis Presley was a thrill for me to visit with. Not just once, but a few times. And the way he treated my father, after I had met Elvis a couple of times, and then a time again he was performing in Las Vegas where my dad was visiting with me. And after the performance, we went back to the dressing room, and I introduced my dad to Elvis, Elvis to my dad, and Elvis put an arm around my father's shoulder, took him over to a little couch and sat down, and they visited for the next bunch of minutes. And I was marveling at how kind, how nice, how respectful Elvis was at that time. I appreciated that big time.
Did you meet Elvis? I heard that you actually met...
I did. I met Elvis, and everyone goes, "Wow, you met Elvis?" I was like saying, "Wow, you met like George Washington?" Because he's got such a history, and he goes so deep with a lot of people in their soul. And
sure, he's bigger than
been part of our lives for so long.
Sure.
And I was going back to Australia. I'd come over in '71, and I was going back and forward for visa reasons because they wouldn't let me work here. So I'm on the plane, and the plane's stopping at Hawaii and then going to Australia. And I walk on, and Elvis is in the in the first class cabin. I'm in the back of the bus, of course. And towards the end of the flight, he came back and started signing autographs and taking photos of people. I've never seen a celebrity do that.
Sure.
It was amazing. And I was, at the time, I was managed by a guy named Steve Binder, who was the director of the Elvis comeback special, the '68 special.
The famous one with the leather?
The leather, yeah.
Yeah.
Steve was the director of that, and he managed me. And so I had a bit of a conversation with Elvis about that. So it wasn't just, hey, Elvis, how you doing? It was, I had actually, connected to a degree.
Sure. A nice guy? I mean,
yeah, he was awesome. I mean, I think the fact that he went up and down signing autographs was like crazy. Everybody else just in the front, in the thing like this, so no one will recognize him. It was incredible.
When we first decided to take the gig with Elvis, we had no idea that there would be any racial flack regarding it. Our first racial encounter was when we went to Texas. Elvis was told by his people that, well, you can leave the black girls home. You don't have to bring them. So Elvis wasn't going to do the Astrodome unless his girls could be with him. And he demanded that we be given the star treatment. We had to be in our convertible where everybody could see us, and our little blonde could drive us. And that was his statement. You don't like it? Deal with it, or I'm not going to be there. And I thought that was very big.
I think in his mind, there are a lot of ways to express your love, and Elvis was very, very. He was very. When he loved and he was generous. He was very personal. If you'll notice, if you saw That's the Way It Is, somebody was sick in the group, and he came over to the girls and knelt down with them and asked about them. How's so and so doing, and how's she feeling, and is there anything I can do? He was so generous and so. He had such compassion and feelings for his. If it was a friend, if it was one of the family members, you know how he was with his mother and his dad, how much he loved his mom and his dad. I mean, it was so obvious in everything that he did. But there's something that he did every year that I don't think a lot of people know about, and he never got any publicity on it because he didn't want it. But every year he took $100,000 at Christmas time. 100,000 is, a lot of money, but to him it didn't seem like a lot of money, obviously. And he would have like an open house at his house at Graceland. And if you came up and had a good story, I mean, he'd write you a check. I need $1,000 he'd write you a check for $1,000. I mean, it would be 1,000 or 5,000 to 10,000. And he gave to a lot of charities in Memphis. To the Boys Club or to the whatever. And he just wrote out checks, $100,000 every year, and gave the money away. And people knew this, so they'd start lining up, and he'd write them a check. It was just unbelievable. And honestly, nobody knew that. But I mean, don't you think that's love? I mean, this is love for your fellow man. This is love, compassion, and it's a different kind of love. But he felt it, and he had it. And he was so generous with us guys. I mean, you can't believe what the gifts he gave us and how much he would come in and he'd hug your neck and show a side of him that you never knew. I mean, I gave him a Bible one time, and he hugged me, and he pushed his forehead against mine, and he said, "This means so much to me." He probably had 100 Bibles, I think that is a part of the love and this love story with Elvis that I think is so important. To prove that how he cared for people, I'm a friend, on the periphery, really. But we were, this thing happened in Las Vegas probably in 1970. We were up in the suite after the second show when we were standing around the piano singing. It was probably 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of the bodyguards comes up to me. Sonny came up and whispered in my ear and said, "Your wife is on the phone." I said, "Well, that's strange, it's 3 o'clock in the morning." And my wife and my family, my children, my 4 children and my wife were back in a motel that we lived in when we were in Las Vegas, which is way off campus from where Elvis lived in the hotel. So anyway, you know, we had a little apartment there, and the kids would go out in the summertime and enjoy Las Vegas in the summer. And so anyway, they were back in the hotel sleeping. But my wife called and said, you need to come back because our house in Nashville has been broken into. Now, we're in Las Vegas. Our house in Nashville has been broken into. She's panicking. Imagine that they broke all the windows and stole everything. And so I didn't want to make a big scene because Elvis was there with his friends having a good time. And I told one of the guys, I said, I need to go. So I snuck out of the door, and I was standing at the elevator on the 30th floor at the penthouse. And there were two security guards there. And I was visiting with them while I was waiting for the elevator. And Elvis comes bursting out of his penthouse apartment there and says, Mosqueo, where are you going? I said, I have to go. Elvis, I got a little family problem. What's the matter? And by then, everybody that was in there is now out in the hallway, you know, and they're surrounding. And well, I just, you know, I got a little problem. What is it? Well, my house back in Nashville has been broken into, and I'm going to go. My wife is crying and upset, and so I'm going to go see what's wrong. He said, well, I'm going with you. He said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to take care of it for you. I said, no, it's okay, really, Elvis. I mean, I got it covered. And the guys are panicking, you know, because Elvis now, he's looking for some adventure. And so he starts giving everybody orders. Get the plane ready. We're going to Nashville, and get my credentials and get my, you know, and everybody get my coat. And so pretty soon everybody's reacting. And before you know it, I go down the elevator, and there's 4 white limousines out there. And Elvis and all his entourage go in these limousines. I'm driving my little car that I had rented, you know, and I'm leading them to this little motel. It was embarrassing. I mean, really. And so, and my wife is in this little motel called the Bali High Motel in Las Vegas, if it could be any worse. And my kids are in another room sleeping. I thought they were sleeping. So we go down the alley behind the motel, and I showed them the way to go through like this little passageway, and we come around to our place, and I knock on the door. My wife answers. She's got her hair in rollers, you know, and she's got her bathrobe on, and she can't believe that all these people are here. I mean, there's an entourage. There's like 20 people. And so we all pile into this little motel room, living room, you know, cheap furniture. And I go, she can't believe, she's crying and very upset. Elvis hugs her. And he says, darling, don't worry, I'm here to take care of things. I mean, that's love, that's compassion. And he settles her down, and then he's telling Felton, who lived about a mile from me out there in the country in Franklin, Tennessee, he said, call the sheriff out there and find out what happened, give us a report. So Felton, this was way before cell phones, so, you know, he's on the phone, a landline, and he's trying to get the sheriff to find out what happened, give him a report. Meanwhile, the kids hear all this ruckus in this room, and they open the door slightly, and they're like stacked up looking out the door from the bedroom at Elvis, and he sees them. He goes in there with them, and I wish you could have seen him that night. It was unbelievable. He had on this leather coat with fur cuffs, and a fur collar, and of course his sunglasses and his big belt and a flashlight about 3 feet long. He had all this, you know, stuff, but it was Elvis, you know. And the kids saw him, they just couldn't believe it. Well, he saw them and went into their bedroom and sat on the bed with these kids. And he started talking to them. And he said, look, I know you know, we're here because your house in Tennessee has been broken into. And he said, I just want to tell you, if they took your bicycles or any of your toys or anything that you loved and you know that was really your favorite, you let me know. Write me a note. Let me know. And he said, I'll replace it better than what you had. I promise you that. And okay. And he said, okay. And yeah, they said, okay. And he patted them or whatever. And they, you know, he just left them in the bedroom. They still talk about it. Now, you know, the kids are in their 40s and 50s, and they're still talking about Elvis coming into their bedroom that night. To me, that's love. I mean, that's the real That's the real deal. And that's what love songs are about. It's about touching people, touching hearts, and making an impression, a lasting, lifelong impression on people. That's a love song.